Because I'm also really looking forward to this.
Me too, because this is the first time I'm doing this topic, so bear with me. It's a lot of new information, so it's the first time that I'm doing something like this about the topic of belonging. So unfortunately, I'm not going to see you now anymore, but okay, I'm just gonna get started now.
Yes.
The business of belonging. So that seems very broad, right? But today my goal is going to be to reframe belonging as a business advantage. So I'm going to show you how employee belonging drives engagement and innovation, and how consumer belonging creates loyalty and unlocks new markets, and what practical steps we in our jobs and organizations in general can take to turn belonging into really measurable impact. So first of all, hi, I'm Antonia, and I'm a digital designer and also doing workshops and consultancy work at the intersection of accessibility, inclusion, and sustainable design in general. So for Sina, for example, I worked at a design school in Calling as well and taught there last year, which was amazing. And usually I help organizations to reframe how to build digital products and making them not only like beautiful, but also inclusive, future ready, and very meaningful. So belonging, right? It's not very hard to understand. Most of us have felt that connection with friends, family, our partners, pets, whatever. But we've all felt and experienced this sense of comfort and safety when we're in a familiar place, surrounded by those who we love and trust. So that word belonging is often talked about as something as like soft and hard to grasp, and nice to have for culture or brand. But in reality, belonging is a fundamental human need that we all have, and it really shapes how customers connect with products and with services. So when I say belonging, I'm talking about something that's really real. It's a feeling of being valued, recognized, and safe to show up as yourself, which I hope that all of you feel in your jobs as well. And this matters in two very powerful ways for your business, or for businesses in general. First, it's employee belonging. Do the people who work in the workplace feel like they can bring their whole selves to work, share ideas, and be taken seriously? That's the foundation of engagement, retention, and innovation. And right now in Germany, actually, we're having big cases of where belonging was really missing in lots of agencies, for example. And second of all, we have consumer belonging. Do the consumers feel seen in your products, services, and your brand? This has been brought to the table vastly in the last decade by social media, of course. Because when they do feel a sense of belonging, their loyalty grows, and so does your market share. So today I really want to show you how both of these, employee belonging and consumer belonging, aren't just what I consider to be a moral imperative. They're massive untapped business advantages. So this isn't about belonging as a buzzword, but as a competitive edge, because it drives both employee potential and consumer loyalty. It's not about perks and fluffy and beanbags, but it's neurological, because without it, we disengage. It's about feeling valued, recognized, safe to contribute, and it's more than inclusion, because inclusion is the invite in these spaces, but belonging is the feeling and this like human desire that we have. And it's a hardwired need, because exclusion hurts actually like physical pain, which is why it's so unsafe for brands to be and to act exclusive, not only toward their hires, but also toward the customers, which we, for example, see a lot in the beauty industry, and how creators really call out brands that, for example, don't make an effort for inclusive shading. So this is where we split the conversation. Employees and customers, both are equally important for growth and for our companies or work in general. So for the employees, of course, it's about engagement, innovation, and retention. And for the customers, it's about loyalty, trust, and market growth. So today I went into a full deep dive on some numbers that really, because I love looking at numbers and statistics and everything. And this is what belonging means in hard numbers. A Harvard Business Review study found that employees who experience a really strong sense of belonging show a 56% increase in job performance, are 50% less likely to leave and take 75% fewer sick days. We just saw this at an advertisement agency in Germany, where a lot of the female employees left because of a more or less Me Too scandal there. And they left in this economy, which really makes you see that if they don't feel like they belong and they're safe, they're going to leave. They're going to leave, no matter how much people think that they need their jobs in a specific economy. So for a company with 10,000 employees, for example, all of this is equivalent to like saving 52 million per year, which is a lot of money. And it's not about retention, but employees who feel like they're belonging are 9 times more likely to believe that people in their companies are being treated equitably, and way more likely to want to stay long term. So when we talk about belonging, it's not just this like kind of cultural feel good, it's directly tied to productivity, retention, and equity. Ooh. And to this, sorry, I was switching up my slides there, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to come toward inclusion and disability first and neurodiversity second, but we're just going to switch it up, because neurodiversity is usually overlooked when we look at the inclusion part of belonging, which, for example, is all about people with disabilities in your customer base, in your within your workforce, etc. But mostly overlooked is neurodiversity at work, which is often framed as a huge challenge, but it can be a massive business opportunity. So take ADHD, for example. Around 4 to 5% of German adults live with this. And that's millions of potential employees navigating their workplaces that are not designed for them. So this really isn't a niche topic. And right now, there's 2 companies, really forward-thinking companies, SAP and Deutsche Telekom, that are showing what it looks like to turn this into an advantage. So SAP, for example, has exempted neurodiverse employees from these really rigid return to office rules after COVID, because they started recognizing that flexibility enables them to do their best work. And Telekom actively started redesigning the workflows together with their neurodiverse employees to reduce sensory overload in meetings. So here as well, I love to say, like, we have to listen, build empathy, and ask hard questions. And there's cases of where we can co-create the sense of belonging together with our employees as well, just like this. And the shift here is quite powerful, because neurodiversity is not something that you can train away or ignore. It's an asset when leaders provide and recognize the right structure and tools. And that means it's just not an HR only topic, it's a future leadership skill. So we can create belonging for neurodiverse employees and all other employees to unlock innovation, engagement, and loyalty that others are leaving on the table. And loyalty is still going to be a massive topic in this. Because when we shift from employees to customers, then the business case gets just as strong, if not even stronger. And honestly, it's still being vastly overlooked. So I've been saying this for a long time. Globally, around 1.6 billion people live with a disability. That's a lot. And that's not including people with neurodivergence. So in North America and Europe alone, this group represents 2.6 trillion US dollars in disposable income. That is a ton of money. And it's only North America and Europe, right? So if you include their families and friends, who usually behave as an echo chamber for these people, because they tend to shout from the rooftops when a company or a brand offers inclusive solutions, whether they are products, digital, whatever, or they cancel out and stop buying from a company. So these are also very important to take into considerations. And taking them into consideration, the market share is even as big as 18.3 trillion US dollars. And yet most organizations are not capturing this value. In fact, 74% of companies admit that they've already lost consumers because of the digital experiences weren't accessible. And that flip side is really, really powerful, because companies that invest in accessibility report 38% of revenue increases and 53% stronger customer loyalty. That comes from a very recent study from Germany. And this is why belonging really matters to consumers. If people don't feel like a brand recognizes them, then they walk away, because you as a customer end up feeling frustrated, sad, angry. You just don't feel like somebody thought about you. But if you do feel like you've been taken into consideration, invited, you feel belonging, then they don't just stay, but these people advocate, they return, and they spend more. And that shows that belonging doesn't always mean massive investments. Sometimes it's small signals that unlock huge trust. I don't know if you heard about this, but Walmart, for example, in the US and in Canada, started creating sensory-friendly hours before and after the normal hours to further increase inclusion and customer loyalty, so that neurodiverse consumers can shop in silence and peace. And it had a huge impact for Walmart. So when we talk about consumer and employee belonging in Europe, then we really have to look at ethnocultural minorities as well. And those are not a small group. It's a vital and growing part of Europe's workforce, customer base, and economy. And research shows, and I can of course provide you with the sources later, that greater inclusion of ethnocultural minorities could contribute around 120 billion to Europe's GDP every year. And that's a triple win, because it fills talent gaps with tight labor markets, it boosts economic empowerment for underrepresented communities, and it strengthens our entire economy overall. And why am I saying this? Because I work a lot with accessibility, talk a lot about neurodiverse people, people with disabilities, etc. But it's about intersections of all people who are either minorities or thought of as minorities that have massive underrepresented groups, and we should really take them into consideration, because they, for example, they're highly trained, they have high market share as consumers, but they're just overlooked because, well, I could go on and on about this, I won't. But the takeaway is quite simple. Inclusion and DEI are not just morally imperative, from my perspective anyways. In Europe's current economic climate, it's a lever for competitiveness. And companies that create belonging for minorities, for LGBTQ people, for Flinta, for females, as we say in German, and for people with disabilities, both in their workforce and their customer base, they position themselves to grow. And those that don't risk being left behind. And up to now, I've looked very much at belonging as both an employee and a consumer driver. And I've shown you a lot of numbers. Again, I can provide you with them later as well. And the risk of ignoring these possibilities, to really, really consider what this could do for you personally in your work, for your consumers, etc. But how do we make belonging a reality in our organizations? I always say start small. I know that people often get overwhelmed. Developers can get overwhelmed with making everything perfect for accessibility, for example, or for creating the perfectly safe space at work when it comes to HR, for example. But it's about starting small, actually starting, reframing our success metrics, broadening our input, like, for example, bringing in more diverse perspectives, questioning our own assumptions, and making space for really uncomfortable questions and signals as well, because this opens the space for us to grow. And way too often, organizations stop at the legal minimum. I see this in accessibility all the time. Accessibility standards, diversity policies, DEI statements on the website, that's really not enough. So the first strategic move for me is to invest in inclusion beyond compliance, because true belonging requires investing in your teams, processes, and your culture. And if we think about SAP or Telecom, for example, they didn't just comply, because neurodiversity isn't a matter of compliance. Those people are not being taken into compliance, but they adapted their structures to unlock strengths of neurodiverse employees and leverage these strengths as well. And a second move, what I always say, is build with, not for. Because in this case, belonging happens when people feel like they had a voice in shaping the space. I work a lot for and advocate a lot for co-creation and this building with. So that means involving, in this case, employees in decision-making, co-creating products with the customers, and not designing in a vacuum or our own echo chambers. And that's the difference between the designing for example, marginalized groups, and designing with them, really inviting them in. And Walmart sensory-friendly hours, for example, worked because they listened to consumers and families directly. And the third one is measuring. We all love to measure, and what we measure shows what we value. If we only measure clicks or turnover, then we miss the deeper picture. Add belonging signals to your dashboards, employee retention across groups, accessibility adaptation, perceptions of equity. I, for example, always share this incredible product inclusion measure list by Google, which if that's something you're interested in, I can share with you. It gives a really good insights into reshaping KPIs toward accessibility. And studies show that these really correlate with performance, innovation, and loyalty, and they rarely get tracked, which I really think is a mistake. And these three moves, investment, co-creation, and measurement, are practical, repalatable, and they set the stage for belonging to become a part of your DNA, your company's DNA, your customer DNA, rather than an initiative that just comes and goes. And that's not about being nice. It's about building that organizations that truly last. Because for me, and that's always my last one, inclusion isn't a checkbox or a feature. And I hate this word so much, but it's truly a mindset shift. It's about asking better questions, listening differently, and really continuously expanding who we design for and with. And with such a diverse group here, of course, I'd also love to learn from you, because I'm not here to lecture. I'm just here to invite you into this question and process. And if it's possible, I'm not sure where we are on time. I would love to also hear from you and hear your stories. I know I can sometimes be a bit quick and talk too fast. I'm sorry. I'm very happy to go back
Don't apologize.
Go back on
this
something.
Was really good.
But you know your industries better than I ever could. And now I also see you again. I wrote down some questions that would really interest me a lot. So if you would be willing to engage with me, I have 3 questions. Yeah, Matthias already raised the hand, so go ahead.
This is going out of control. First, before Matthias, I would say thank you very much, Antonia. That was very good. What I should have said perhaps at the beginning, and you may have thought this along the way, for me, this is a different way of thinking about inclusion. Obviously the right thing to do. You make the point also that it's not just about compliance, it's something bigger. But for me was a new connection in my brain was this belonging, almost like studying fan culture like Apple or Taylor Swift. What might we learn from those to improve inclusivity?
Yeah.
And
I could talk on and on about that. For example, like I'm a massive Formula One fan, as you know, Janos. And
let's hear it from Matthias, perhaps.
But the market share for women has grown so much exponentially since they've gotten way more exposure to it, and you can really learn from these market shares. I just don't like to frame women as minorities, so I leave them out of these talks.
I will not bring up Lego flowers, but I will just pass it over to Matthias.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really interesting. And I think it's really a good thing to add this dimension of belonging to something that, can become a bit impersonal. When we talk about inclusion, it's always about the others, but belonging is more about us together. What I was thinking about when you were talking was, this reminds me of a lot of things that we experience in digital technology, be it search engine optimization or accessibility. it's really the strongest when you manage to not do it as an afterthought, when you manage to make it into a part of your process from the very beginning. And I think belonging is something that you can't do afterwards. It has to be there from the beginning.
I fully agree. I agree so much. I mean, that's the same for sustainability efforts, right? Also accessibility efforts. It's 10 times more costly for companies to put accessibility on top rather than making it from the beginning. So I fully agree.
Very good. Anybody else? Feel free to use the raise hand feature. I think Matthias showed the way. Sorry, I didn't pick on you for the introduction round, Matthias, but good to hear your voice. You belong here. Thank you, Antonia, also for the case studies. I think this call to me is also timely because this topic, the other half of the title for this call, so there's the business of the belonging, but then there's turning inclusion. The other half of this is suffering a little bit in these times. Companies seems to be less vocal. And I think it's not because they have forgotten the value of inclusion.
I think it's also a lot about, in my perspective, the wrong political signals that are being sent, where economical power is really in inclusion and sustainability. All of a sudden, it doesn't count. It feels like it doesn't count anymore, which is why I bring up numbers, because they really point us in that direction.
Very good. Great. Let's jump to Spain. Daniel, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you and to hear you. Thank you, Antonia, for the talk. As you were speaking about all these ideas, I was thinking about one trend that we are seeing, at least in Spain, and it's that we are kind of excluding people from the market that are older, and that's a very... it's a thing that keeps me thinking a lot because, it's a lot of people that have plenty of experience and for whatever reason, they get excluded of the market and from our companies at the end of the day, right? So I was thinking about your thoughts about this issue. If this is something that is happening everywhere or just in Spain. I'm seeing this trend more and more on LinkedIn, for example. And I was thinking if you had ideas, because when we think about exclusion, we usually think about different groups, but not that particular group of people, right?
So I would say that is a super important point, which also is a big case, I would say, for accessibility. I work in Germany, and for me, everyone who's above a certain age, I always say we're all just only temporarily abled. And Germany seems to forget that we are a very old nation and that accessibility is going to be super important for like 20% of our people already, without taking people with disabilities into consideration, which is a lot. But they also tend to forget about that. And we recently, Jonas, in the last designer peer group, we had somebody talk about that. I forgot her name, unfortunately, but she's a bit older as well. And she also said that she constantly has to prove and invite herself into spaces and prove, because she has so much incredible value to bring, but people don't ask her anymore since she's over 60, I think, which is very shocking to me because she has incredible value to bring to the table and she always gets forgotten, which I think is shocking. So yeah, they definitely are a big group to be considered.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Antonia. How about belonging signals and this KPIs in that direction? Is there anything more you can share there? I think there is a part of the diverse group here who are really into numbers and measuring things.
If I can wait a second, I can maybe, because I just airdropped it yesterday. So there is ways of measuring. And what I always refer back to, because I didn't come up with it, are the measuring tools from Google that they came up with for product inclusion. And apparently I had to see yesterday that I had a QR code for this, because I can maybe put it in a chat. Wait a second.
Or just put it in the chat or email me.
Because then maybe people can
download
it. people can download and have a look at it, because I compressed a bit of the KPI measuring tools that Google uses for their
Yes,
specifically
please share
their
it.
inclusion. Yeah, just a second.
Yes, multitasking. But I think you said it well. I can juggle a little bit while you're copy pasting, but you said it well. It's what gets measured gets done, right? And I think some softer, for lack of a better word, KPIs in this direction is a super valuable way to track progress. And so when we meet again, when we talk again in 6 months, we can see, are we actually making progress towards turning inclusion into a business advantage?
Yes, definitely. I can't put it in the
Market
chat,
advantage.
unfortunately. I'm going to share it with you so you can share it.
Yeah, so if you send it with me on any of the channels where we're connected, then I'll put it in the chat 10
because
seconds after.
it also really refers to measuring your accessibility, representation, and culture. And people are sometimes a bit disappointed almost, because I always refer back to asking questions, a lot of questions and hard questions, and inviting other people into the processes. And that is also how you can start measuring if you have different champions within your corporations, for example, who are then the ones who have different questions that they can ask, and they can come up with questions, for example, like who has been, when we talk about UX, for example, who has been invited into audits for testing, who has not been invited into them, who's benefiting here, who's not, what are we talking about, location, language, etc. And they talk a lot about making their team different champions for measuring these success rates for accessibility, access in general, and representation, because that's a huge part in that case of product inclusion.
Great, and we managed to finish right on time. Thank you
Yay.
very much for taking the time to give us numbers, give us advice, give us tangible actions and recommendations. I really appreciate it.
And if somebody wants to connect with me and talk further, because I always love to keep conversations going, go ahead. I'd love to talk more to you, everyone.
That's all we have. Thank you very much for joining. Good to see everyone. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon. We have another one coming up on Thursday on the hot topic of search with Harvard Business School. Whoa. See you there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.